Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all. I'm glad to see some familiar faces and people who are also in the global classroom sphere, and some of you are new. So welcome to this space, and thank you for sharing this wonderful day with us. Thank you, Nikki, for that introduction. Nikki is actually a student that I met first virtually last summer, so I'm excited to have this in-person opportunity to engage with her. Philip is joining me here. He's on Zoom. Philip, you want to give us a little wave?
I'm supposed to say something at this point, right?
No, not really. I mean, you can wave, we can introduce you. So we're colleagues, and we've worked together now for the past few years on establishing global classrooms. We actually met when Philip was joining us here in ISTEP, and it's been a very exciting experience to see Philip develop his own global classroom through Praxis 3, which is offered here to our engineering science students. And of course, I've been on my own little journey with global classrooms as well. So this presentation today, which is not going to be clicking through for me apparently, is, let me see if there's a way for me to ensure that it does click through. Ah, there we go. Now, this presentation today is going to be on, again, global classrooms and how each of you can build your own global classroom. So hopefully, I've designed it as a workshop. Hopefully, that's useful to you in that workshop format. I know we kicked off this morning with a bit of a land acknowledgement, but as a settler here, I feel it absolutely, necessary for me to also show my appreciation for being able to meet on this space, to be able to share this place, and to learn from so many of the values and the culture and the lessons that those people who came before me, who have built this space and have developed this space before me, please come on in, have shown us the way. So I'm really appreciative of that, and I want to acknowledge the land that the University of Toronto operates on, and recognize the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Mississaugas of Credit River, and many other Indigenous and Aboriginal groups that call this place home. So today's session, and I know some of the slides are going to be obscured because of the Zoom bar, but please forgive me for those technical aspects. So today's session is going to be divided into 3 phases. Are we okay with that? 3. We learned this morning that 4 to 7 is what we keep in our brains, 4 to 7 items, so we're going to keep 3. Don't want to push you to your max cognitive loads. We're going to first start by defining. Philip and I are going to do that. Sorry for moving around. Philip and I are going to do that, and we're going to help you define what a global classroom is, what it can be, and what we've done in our global classrooms. So we're going to define it through examples and through some terminology. Then we're going to give you an opportunity to discuss it amongst yourselves and internally within your internal voices, and to examine some current opportunities that you might have in your classrooms or in your learning spaces to incorporate some of those practices that make a global classroom a rich environment. After you've had a few minutes to spend with a worksheet and with potential partners at your tables, we're going to talk about designing those global classrooms and fleshing some of those ideas out. In that design phase, in that final phase of our discussion, I'm also going to give you some resources. Now, there are a lot of opportunities right here at University of Toronto campus, regardless of which dimension of campus you're from, a lot of opportunities that provide you with small pockets of funds to really build up that global classroom. So let's take advantage of those pools of money and the boxes of treasure that are out there to help you make your classrooms a better space. You're all with me? Yes. Yeah, you're feeling, I know the energy is dying down at the end of the day. We're overwhelmed, but hopefully you can stay with me for a bit longer. So let's start with that definition phase. I want to bring a lot and send a lot of credit to CIE, the Center for International Experience, and the Office of the Vice President International. I held a role called Global Classroom Advisor for about a year or 2. This was a huge privilege to learn more about the global classrooms that happen all across campus here at the University of Toronto. So I want to break it down into the global classroom types that we saw, and the types of global classrooms that each of you can have and design as well. We can have a low-touch global classroom, which provides this tiny little sprinkle of spice for our students that gives them an opportunity to see what it's like on the other side, what it's like somewhere else in the world. This sprinkle can be, this little dash of seasoning, can be something like a guest lecture. It doesn't have to be heavy. It can be one opportunity, 1 hour, where you have a guest lecture from an invited speaker from somewhere else in the world. They can join by Zoom, they can join asynchronously, they can send materials or artifacts. These are light touch ways or low touch ways that our students can actually learn a little bit more about contexts beyond their sphere, outside of their classroom. Still lets you make that classroom global. It still gives that element, but it's not overwhelming and it's not overpowering. If you're into cooking, it's like adding a little bit of saffron. A little goes a long way. Then we've got things like medium touch classrooms. Medium touch classrooms have a bit more flavor, a bit more body, and you're asking a bit more of your students. It may mean that there's synchronous lectures happening between a couple of different classrooms, a couple of different settings. And what do we mean by that? Meaning, maybe my class has a joint lecture with students from the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Maybe my class is doing a negotiation and we're actually collaborating with other students who are in a negotiation course at the University College London, right? They have that opportunity to interact. What that does is it pushes our students' boundaries and encourages them to actually interact with people elsewhere in the world. Now, that interaction alone isn't going to be groundbreaking or ground shaking even. It might feel like a little bit of a tilt. But it's about the gesture. It's about starting that conversation. It's about building that network for them and exposing them to that opportunity. Because think about it this way. A lot of our students don't get that opportunity to do a lot of those kinds of things. And if we can build just a small bit of these global interactions, it exposes our students to everything that's outside of our classroom that we can bring in. Now, the other thing is, it doesn't always have to involve external bodies. Now, I'm going a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I want to say that you can have a global classroom without connecting and building those connections beyond your classroom. You can bring global elements, considerations, incorporate research and opportunities for research for your students as well. Now, we also get to the high touch. This is intense. Rather than tell you what the high touch is, I'm going to pull us through to think about these two examples. I'll go back to that slide. These two examples of high touch that I've experienced, and also that my colleague Philip has incorporated a medium to high touch in his classroom. So two projects that I've been involved in that I call global classrooms are INVEST, which is focused, it's a high touch type of global classroom that incorporates learning objectives that help students display their disciplinary expertise in context. This is through a capstone project or a master's or PhD research project where they're working on a problem based somewhere else in the world. At that point, I'll also say that they're not only working on a problem based somewhere else in the world, but they have teammates that are at the universities in other places as well, building that experience together, working over a long period of time together. This is high touch because those students come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different parts of the world. They're experiencing different problems. And they're uniting on learning these global technical skills. The Global Engineering Design Studio, similar. However, rather than just two institutions working together, it changed things up by bringing 4 to 6 different institutions together and having 1 or 2 students from each of these institutions work over a 4-month period together, or an 8-week to 4-month period together, on a global project related to an SDG. Okay, so I'm going to throw us back to Philip, who's going to tell us a little bit about Praxis, which is engineering, an engineering science required course that he designed and led his students through. Philip, take it away if you can hear us.
All right, thank you, Elham. So Praxis 3 is a second-year design course in engineering science. It's required for all engineering science students, and we've decided to turn it into a global classroom using some, I think, what we'd call medium touch approaches. The general overview is that students work on a project that is situated in a global community, often outside of North America. Many other places are coming from Africa or East Asia. And then they're also working together in some cases with multidisciplinary peers who are non-engineers on collaboration. And so we call this sort of complex collaboration. They're given a prompt which is sort of very broad and vague within the community, and there's multiple teams working with a particular community context, and so they can take that context and go in a number of different directions. It is a sort of prototyping course as well, so one of the things that they do as part of their design is come up with a prototype to communicate their design ideas, and they also, we try to incorporate, prior to Praxis 3, they've just had a course on engineering and society, so we have them think about sort of broader impacts and broader implications around ethics, empathy, bias, and things like that that show up in these cases. So going back to sort of the framework that Elham presented earlier, if you could click, I think these things are animated. Elham, can you click to move forward? I don't have control over. Yeah, cool. So there's two parts to the course that can have a global component. One is the context in when the students are working. For this course, that's always global. And the students occasionally interact with the partner. So we often have a partner that we're calling an opportunity champion. They're the ones that we craft these prompts with. They have some knowledge of the communities, but they are not the primary stakeholder. They provide perspective. The students are supposed to investigate the communities themselves and get an understanding of that global community. Next click. So the peer interaction is something that we've played around with a number of different ways. We've run the course 3 times now. The first 2 times, the peer interaction was also global, interacting with students outside of Canada, in the US, but they were non-engineering students, and so we had sort of this global virtual interaction. The interaction was also sort of limited and scripted as well, so it wasn't high touch where they're doing it throughout the whole semester, although logistically it felt like high touch. I would say it still fits within medium touch. But this year in 2023, we did that locally, so that does not have a global component. And so that just shows that, you know, in any course, there are different components that you can play around with to get sort of a global feel or not. We may go back to global with a peer piece, not yet, but we have sort of that option if we want to for this course. Over to you, Elham.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Philip. So now you've heard a couple of a medium touch, a high touch. You've heard some examples of low touch. Are we ready for a little bit more? Yeah? So we're going to do a bit of discussion. I'm sure most of you are familiar with how to formulate learning objectives. And if you're not, it's fine. I want to share 3 overarching categories of learning objectives. There may be other ways to develop learning objectives out there too. But one of the first things you need to do if you've decided that you want to turn your regular classroom or your special classroom into a global classroom, or your learning opportunity into a global one of the things that you can do is think about what you want that learning objective for your students to be. What is it that you want them to take away when they leave, at the end of the course or at the end of the learning experience? Do you want their lesson or their takeaway to be knowledge-based? Do you want them to learn more about how this is done in this part of the world, or skill-based? Do you want them to learn how to do things? Or do you want it to be attitude-based? A change or shift in, if we're talking about control shifting, a shift in their mindset towards something. So thinking about these overarching categories of learning objectives, we start with that. What is it that we want to learn? So for INVEST, we wanted it to be an attitude-based change. We wanted it to be a skill-based experience, but an attitude-based change towards how they're working in these settings. So while we're going through this next phase, we're going to be thinking about opportunities. How do you identify these opportunities? If you're teaching a technical skilled course, how can these technical skills transfer to different parts of the world? How can these technical skills be shared within a global team, in a virtual team? So we're going to share these considerations for how the research is being done, for how the learning is being done. Also realizing that you need resources to do this, right? As an educator or an educational developer, you cannot turn your classroom into a global classroom without resources. Sometimes that resource is actually what we think of as the most common form of resource, which is what? Money, right? Money is important. You use money in order to get things. You use money in order to hire TAs. You use money in order to buy supplies. You use money in order to pay honorariums, all of these kinds of things. So where can you seek those resources to help you develop that global classroom? So you have the objective. Where's the money? Where's the time? Time, time, that's a resource you can't just pull out from anywhere, right? And then what are the tools? What are the best ways to do this? Is there software that can help you make this classroom more efficient? How are your students going to be collaborating with each other? Do they actually need to physically meet in the same space if you are setting up that high touch? So these are things, these are considerations. This is a lot of content, and I don't want you to be overwhelmed. So I'm trying to simplify it down a little bit. So while this recipe card is just it's not a complete recipe card, it's the start of a recipe. So first, I want you to think about what type of global classroom you want to have. Then what learning objectives you want that global classroom to have. Do you want it to be a high touch, a low touch, or a medium touch? And do you want the students to take away a knowledge type learning objective, a skill type learning objective? Or is your intention really an attitude shift or an attitude change? Once we've identified those two things, then we can identify the needs that we have, which means what opportunities do we want to incorporate into our class? Do we want interaction opportunities? Do we want research opportunities for students to think and talk and learn more? And then we talk about the resources we need. Back to the time, the money. How much time can we afford in our course, in our learning opportunity for our students to be able to dedicate to this? So Philip is kind of covering the QR code, but I can move him. I can move him a little bit. And then if you are interested, I've made a little bit of a worksheet with these three different overarching starting recipes that you can copy, because I know we're running low on time. I did want you to brainstorm them. So that QR code will lead you to a Google Doc that you can copy. No, we're supposed to use OneDrive, and usually I do, but this was a last minute kind of adjustment because I couldn't share the OneDrive link. But you can create a copy of this Google Doc, which will let you kind of use it as a worksheet to develop the beginning, the brainstorm part of your own global classroom. I'll give you a minute to do that. So how does everyone in the room feel? Do you feel up to the task of maybe hypothetically applying this to a learning environment that you create for your students right now? Do you want to take 5 minutes to do that? Shall we? Thumbs up if we do, thumbs down if we don't. I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up. Yeah? Okay, so let me give you 5 minutes to just use the worksheet. Think about the items, the bullet points that I've put there, and think how you would work through them. Now, I know that most of us have Bloom and Fink's taxonomies tattooed in the back of our minds, but just in case you don't, I have got 2 QR codes, because you can never overwhelm people with QR codes, right? That's sarcasm, I promise. I've got 2 QR codes here if you want to just kind of take a look at these taxonomies as you're potentially thinking about learning objectives. No pressure, though. And I'll move Philip again. Philip, you're always on these QR codes. What's going on? Are you anti-QR?
I have nothing against QR.
I'm going to move you to the top here. And feel free to discuss with those around you if you wish. You don't have to stay silent. Yeah?
I just wanted to ask you a question, just to make sure that I'm able to get this. How do you what sort of resources are there to actually make the connections with other institutions? Is that something that's working?
No, I'm really glad you asked that, and I want everyone to hear the answer. Is anyone snapping? Okay, let me get you. I promise I don't have another QR code for that, but I do have.
How does it look in terms of credit transfer? So I tried a couple of times with universities in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Again,
there's always a credit. So if there's a 4-credit option established in the partner university and a 4-credit option established here, super easy. But if you have to build a credit, then you have to go through curriculum committees, which takes a bit of planning and a bit of effort. I'm going through that for 2 courses right now, and it's heavy, but it's possible if you can provide the justification. There is an equity conversation around whether you provide it for credit of all institutions or not. Because if you have it for credit here at U of T, but it's not for credit at the Ukrainian university, that is an equity barrier. What motivates those students to engage in that activity?
Exactly. So it's for credit here at UFT, and I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Basically,
How you get them.
If the university wants to assign grade for it, do we need to get in touch with UFT?
Yeah, you need to make sure there's a lot of planning that goes into that and making sure that they're able to establish it as a for-credit course. One of the ways you can get around it is through certificates and providing certificates, sorry. And that can be done, but it's not the same. It's difficult.
Actually, there is also, in addition to learning, there is the interest to have a course from UFT.
Yeah.
Basically on their
Yeah.
or at least somewhere. That's
So what you're talking about is taking a course at U of T when you're not a U of T student, which is a bit more of an exchange, and that's not a global classroom per se, that's a different sphere. But it's an interesting notion, it's an interesting idea for sure.
Yeah, as a result, they're mostly doing it through my internships.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's one of the challenges to breaking down the barriers, for sure. But thank you for that question.
Because they have a lot of elderly.
Yeah, so they're not.
Allowed to go to the test for the certification from the which also makes a little bit of difference. But my
Hi, how you doing? I'm good. How are you doing? Good. You're working through it? Oh yeah, you're actually working
I'm
through
not
it.
doing other things, I'm actually doing this. So,
I'm so excited.
so I've got, I teach this career management course, and I've just been thinking about that attitude, like there's knowledge, there's skills, there's attitudes, and you've got 2 situations with such an international
always more challenging.
you have people from other parts of the world
Yeah.
bringing their international experience here, and do I continue my career here in Canada and figure out how to optimize my international experience,
Or do I
figure out how to go back to my home country
and take this there?
and take this there? And it occurs to me, like I have students in this class interviewing engineering leaders.
It's a TEP course, right?
Yeah, it's a teaching course, yeah. And I think that the learning objective, something about this, the global adaptation, is being able to navigate the tension, not to make a decision, because they may not make a decision in the span of a few months of the course, but to deal with the tension with confidence, optimism, and resilience, with the question of my international career, here in Canada, there in my home country. Like how does that sound, like as a learning objective?
Yeah, I think that's a good learning objective because they're dealing with something. They're giving themselves time and space to think about it, right? And that's really big. That's important.
Time and space, and I think when it comes to these things, hearing other people's stories.
Yeah.
So a success story of somebody who brought their international experience to Canada, and a success story, which is hard, of somebody who came here, did an engineering degree, went back to their home country.
They exist. Those stories exist. It's not. I mean, we don't have to be a brain drain. We can start distributing and sharing
And it
talent.
happens. I mean, I know it happens, and my students are asking about it.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Half of them are international students, and even if they're not, they have like an international background.
Yeah.
So they're deep.
Utilizing that is really important. I think that's a perfect. I might call on you to share your example.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
So and then how do you do that? Like, guest lecture or bring in stories, right? I
Or
think
bring in stories, or just have students share their stories together as in a team setting. That's low touch, but it's valuable.
yeah,
For sure.
Because they all know people, right? They
Yeah.
know people who have both,
Gone
made
and come
both
back.
directions.
Yeah.
Some who have succeeded, and some who have
Some who
struggled.
haven't, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. It's really valuable. Am I okay in inviting you back? Can I give you 30 seconds to wind down? I came around to visit your tables and you were so engaged in conversation you didn't even see me, and I love that. I love that when that happens because it means you're either discussing this or you're deep in that topic. So can I get maybe 1 or 2 examples of what you talked about and what you thought of maybe related to this? Yeah.
We were just finishing a really interesting conversation that coming off the heels of a learning symposium. We go, it's all talking about equity and diversity, and we were talking about how to bring that lens to something like this, because if you're dealing with institutions in different parts of the world with like different access, and it could be something just as simple as like technology and internet access to, you know, the quality of the education, but you don't want to create a program that is somehow like recolonizing knowledge in the inequity of the relationship or highlighting the differences in like the quality of the programming where someone else is. So just like from the very outset from design, thinking about if you're going to be engaging with places like, obviously you gave the example of University College London, sure, that's going to be like a really top-notch research one institution.
Very different than.
But if you're engaging with places in the Global South, for example, or where, you know, there are just different things that might impact the quality of like public versus private education, you just want to be so mindful of that before, when you're even like conceptualizing a program, before you even get into things like the learning outcomes. It's like
Absolutely.
in terms of engagement there.
And I promise you, this is not meant to be like all-encompassing. We have 30 minutes barely to be able to cover this. There's so much more to it. So I thank you for bringing that and highlighting that point. Understanding where your partners, if you have partners, understanding where your partners are coming from, what the resources are there, and recognizing that you're not going there to just deliver and walk away. We're not about colonizing. We're about learning together, and it's about growth. So I really love that. Can I get your name?
Sam.
Sam, nice to hear from you, Sam. One more comment.
Yeah, so you were helping me write an attitude learning objective. So I teach an engineering leadership course all about career management, and we have a lot of students, international students, who bring their talents here to Canada. We have other people thinking, do I have my career here in Canada or back home? And there's a real tension, and there's a lot of stress and worry and fear, and so the attitudinal learning objective is something like dealing with this tension with optimism and confidence and resilience. So I know that this is a need, and I've heard it from so many students, and the question is then how do you implement it? And you get stories. I think getting stories of people who have brought their international skills to Canada and those who have taken a degree here at U of T and gone back to their home country is and had successful careers there. So I think stories is the way to implement that, but hear other people's suggestions on it.
Yeah, definitely. Sharing those stories. You don't always have to go outside of your classroom to bring global experiences into your classroom. Sometimes those experiences that our students have had, because we have students from all across the world here at U of T, we are so privileged to have that diversity here, and to be able to harness that to do great things like share and learn together is valuable too. Okay, so I know we're late because someone just walked in, and I know you're probably tired and you want to go. But I want to kind of say that there's a lot of opportunities that you can leverage here at the University of Toronto as well. I'm going to give a shout out to some people in the room, not to not recognize others, but as resources. So we've got Heather, who's sitting in the back over there. And what I've got here is, if you want to reach out to Heather, who is at the Center for International Experience and is one of our advisors on Global Classroom, or you know, in a position, I know that's not your title, but she knows some things about global classrooms and how to get your global classroom off the ground. Heather is a great resource, and you can reach her by emailing global.classrooms@the University of Toronto. Jennifer, if you're in engineering, Jennifer is sitting right over there, superstar. She's just joined us. And Jennifer is in an international interactions or international experience role for undergrads, I think, or on all levels. And so if you're in engineering, Jennifer is a phenomenal resource as well. And there's more people in the room and more opportunities. Of course, money talks. I'm not saying any of these opportunities are guaranteed, but I've thrown a few links for different opportunities. If you're thinking about establishing a global classroom, if you're thinking about exploring these ideas and these notions, University of Toronto, again, we are privileged to be here, has a lot of opportunities to help you get those classrooms off the ground and get those ideas off the ground. So I didn't make QR codes for all of these. I was going through QR code fatigue. But if you take a picture, most of these sites provide you with a couple of different opportunities from across campus that have resources that can support you as you think through and develop and plan and implement those classrooms. There's actually a teaching grants workshop, which is happening quite soon. Megan's in the room. I don't know if you know about this one or if, yeah, and Megan Burnett here from CTSI, so it's nice to see you. And thank you for creating these kinds of opportunities. I think if we utilize the resources that we have right here on campus, there's so much that we can do for our students to really break down some of these barriers and create bridges and create tunnels and create pathways for them to learn from across the world. I'll leave you with 2 quotes from students who engaged in a couple of the global classroom opportunities that both Philip and I were a part of. It does make an impact for them. It does change things. And it doesn't only change things for the university students here, it also changes things for our students who are all across the world, whether they're in the global south or whether they're in other areas that have access as well. These lessons and these global classroom opportunities allow us to be better global citizens, have better global competencies. That's it. I didn't go through all the presentation, but I thank you so much for your attention and time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Philip.